Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 22 of Global Contenders, the review series for the touring car selection of Gran Turismo 6, and some of the cars which we have already reviewed, such as the Ford Falcon V8 supercar, and also this vehicle, and some others to come, are vehicles which don't necessarily fall into the touring car category in a strict sense, but they're very similar to touring car categories, and they don't really fall into any other category, strictly speaking, either. So basically a touring car series is about as close as we can get for a legitimate categorization of these vehicles, such as the Ford Falcon. That vehicle technically is in a class of its own on the game, but it wouldn't be fair to just have that car left unreviewed because it doesn't have any direct rivals. This vehicle is similar, and some others to come in the series also, some of which are also from the same company, such as the Renault Clio Trophy. Now this vehicle is the Renault Megane Trophy, it's the newer shape vehicle, and it has some pretty impressive numbers. For a start, there's the price. The price on this car is very good. 100 grand for this vehicle is a pretty decent price. Now, as we said, technically it's not a touring car, but it does offer a very similar overall package to some touring cars, not all. Most touring cars, of course, would be front-engine vehicles, whereas this is mid-engine, and so it's kind of akin to a GT machine, but at the same time similar to a touring car. It runs, of course, against other Meganes in the Trophy series, and it kind of doesn't really classify in any normal series as such, not that I'm aware of at least, but we are considering it as being a kind of touring car just for the sake of a review category. Now, what you get from this car for 100 grand is a 3.5 litre naturally aspirated, as we said, mid-mounted engine. It's rear-wheel drive and fully tuned. As I said, it puts out some pretty impressive numbers. It may be based on a hot hatch, but the numbers on this car are more akin to a sports car. 545 horsepower, 404 foot-pounds of torque, and it only weighs 955 kilos, making it lighter than most touring cars and most GT machines. Now, potentially that combination of ultra-low weight, which is a good 100 kilos or so lighter than most of the top touring cars, combined with the fact that it's got roughly the same kind of horsepower as, say, a Nissan GT-R Black Edition, you could potentially have some incredible performance. Now, the horsepower per tonne is very good because the weight is far less than a tonne, so you're looking at 571 horsepower per tonne, which again, for a vehicle of its type, is very good, and the PP is actually quite reasonable. It's not too high, but it is in a similar kind of region to some DTM cars, such as the Calibra, the 155, and some others as well. It sits at 569 pp, fully tuned, which, as I said, is pretty reasonable, especially given that lightweight competition vehicles on Gran Turismo tend to be placed a little too high for their own good in terms of PP, the Red Bull Junior syndrome, as I like to call it. But the question is, of course, what does this car have to offer in terms of racing potential? Because it's all well and good to be a great one-make race car, but the problem with assessing a car purely on those grounds are, of course it's going to be good. You're up against the exact same rivals, so the only demarcation between the two is the driver. Whereas, if you then take that one-make race car and put it up against an entire field of varied opposition, you may very quickly find that it's not actually that great. It's only good against itself, in effect. Kind of like a time attack car, but racing itself. Now, this car isn't amazing in terms of competitive range. I wouldn't say it's a vehicle which is going to dominate every track or every opponent that it comes up against, but it can prove useful. Now, the low weight isn't as obvious when you drive the car as I would have hoped. I bought this car very early on Gran Turismo 6 and didn't think much of it. I ended up not using it at all, really, because although it is extremely light, it doesn't feel that light. It doesn't feel heavy by any means, but it doesn't feel as ultra light as it actually is. And that's unfortunate, because that driving feel could have been really useful for weaving through tighter corners, especially when you've got low weight coupled with the higher power. You could have been able to get brilliant average speeds around tracks like Sierra or the Nürburgring Ring, where those attributes come in handy. Unfortunately, that's not as much the case with this car as I would have hoped. In terms of straight line performance, it's pretty good. The acceleration is quite good, the top speed's okay, not particularly amazing, but it's okay, good enough for most tracks. And in terms of if I would recommend racing it, buying it, using it, and when, I would say it's not a vehicle that you should set as a goal. If you're looking to spend cash and get a vehicle which will prove very, very useful on a regular basis, then this isn't really that vehicle. It's not the kind of car which you can use all the time to dominate many, many situations, and many of the cars in this series can be used in that way. The Calibra, the 155, the CLK and various others are brilliant multi-purpose racing cars. This one, not so much. It's much more niched. The question of whether you should buy it is twofold. As I already mentioned, not as an all-rounder, because you just won't get enough use out of it to justify that. But if you're looking for something different, something that literally is in a class of its own, and for a price which doesn't really break the bank, something perhaps like the equivalent of a weekend racer, something that doesn't cost too much, but it's a bit of fun on the side, this could potentially be that. And it is brilliant for one-make racing. There is also, of course, a base model which you can paint, which makes it even more interesting for one-make racing. So overall, you may want to give it a try if you fancy trying something different. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.